So I was writing a talk this week. Well, actually, I wrote it a week and a half ago called Out of the Chaos. And I was developing that talk and nurturing that talk. And then 3 days ago, I remembered, gosh, there's a book that might help me with this. And it's called The Eye of the Storm by Gary Simmons. I didn't have the book, so I got it on Amazon. I got it on Thursday. And as I started to read through it as quickly as I could, I just realized that it is the talk topic. It's a wonderful book, The Eye of the Storm. So my premise is that the world is certainly filled with chaos of all kinds, external chaos. We can just talk about that forever, but this book is particularly focused on chaos that comes onto our shores and that affects our lives and our inner world. That's the chaos that matters. Not that external chaos doesn't matter, but how we interact with it is the important thing. And so I'm going to read from the back cover. Gary Simmons says, in this book, we learn to go beyond merely managing conflict in our lives to actually embracing the conflict, allowing it to teach us what we otherwise might not learn. And it was interesting, the opening lyric of your song, Laura, I wrote down, you said, rising up from misunderstanding, a higher good. Is that what you said? That's sort of a piece of what this theme is today, rising up out of conflict and misunderstanding, and the storms of our life is a higher good. Gary Simmons goes on to say, this process of dealing with this conflict leads us to peacemaking, whether it be with ourselves or in our relationships or as a result of outside circumstances. And he goes on, the book is basically about the premise that the significant storms, the consequential storms, happen in our inner world, and we can deal with them by finding our center. And so I invite you to think about maybe some of the storms that are happening in your life in that way. Interpersonal storms, storms in situations, storms in attitudes, storms in resistance that you may be having, obstacles that you may be encountering. And we'll go into that exploration a little bit today. And one note I have is that we have a tendency to make these storms worse by just listening to our inner talk and spending so much time, maybe even deliberately sabotaging situations in our life because we're afraid of success, per the famous Marianne Williamson quote. About that is what we might be afraid of, our greatness. We might be hypervigilant, waiting for the next thing to come up. You know, when you tune into the news, when you read it on your iPhone or whatever, we have this hypervigilance waiting for something to go wrong. And some of that translates into our lives. We're waiting to see what's going to go wrong. What if this happens? We might say to ourselves, or this is bound to happen. You know, that kind of self-talk. And it's amazing to think about so many hours in which nothing is affecting us, that we spend suffering or worrying about maybe things that happened in the past or things that could happen in the future, but probably never will, usually never will. But we make ourselves suffer in the present because of that hypervigilance. And so there's a challenge. That's one of the greater challenges in all of this movement called unity and the other movement called CSL and any spiritual movement. That challenge is in letting go of these things that are no longer true. So we're going to explore that a little bit more. And what else makes these storms even rougher is our sense of separation. We're all born, just by the nature of us being born, there's a sense of separation. Maybe depending upon the parents that we had or didn't have, the way they were or the way they weren't. And the codependence that arrives out of that, where we rely on another person or situation to make us happy too much in life until we discover our own power. How else do we make these storms worse? we might have misperceptions. We might be walking around with a cloudy lens. 4 years ago, I talked about this story of a fish that just was swimming through the waters, and it just kept on going into muddier and muddier waters, but so gradually that it didn't notice that it was in really muddy water, because it just happened so gradually. It just became part of the fish's environment. And so how are we in those muddy waters, not seeing things clearly, not thinking clearly because of the lens that we put on? This lens might be defensiveness. This lens might be listening too much about what society told us or someone told us or what we told ourselves about ourselves. We might be putting on those goggles of these cloudy lenses. And this is where the author Gary Simmons shares the parable of the dragnet. And he says, well, the parable of the dragnet basically says that the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet. It's cast into the sea and it gathers some fish of every kind. And at the end of time, there will be a kind of a reckoning, a sitting down and going through these containers and throwing away the bad fish and keeping the good fish. And so it will be at the end of the age. But if you interpret that Bible verse metaphysically, you can say that the good fish represent the truths about yourself, or universal truth principles, right? Like there is only love, like there's enough to go around, there's abundance. And the bad fish represent temporary or relative truths that come and go, that are not the real truths. They're false beliefs. They're things that some people subscribe to. And in that subscribing to these false beliefs is where the suffering comes from. I'll say that in a Buddhist way. So that attachment to these false beliefs. So maybe thinking about what is, if your life has been like a dragnet where your brain is memorizing everything that comes in since you've been born, good or bad, what are the things in your net that are the good things that you want to hold on to? And what are the things that are the bad things that aren't even true about you, that it's time to let go? So this is where I come back to the book, where this is often said by Michael Beckwith and other teachers, and it's said in this book a lot, that everything is for you and nothing is against you. Everything is for you and nothing is against you. Even if you don't believe completely that that's true, that mantra and that belief and that behaving as if is going to change your life. But if you believe that it's true, that everything is for you and nothing is against you, it's transformative. So Gary Simmons said, make your path about proving that statement, that everything is for you and nothing is against you. If you make your path about proving that this is true, you will rediscover your wholeness, the real truth about who you really are. And if you should forget this truth, it grounds you to remember perhaps that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're not humans having a spiritual experience here. And so taking that a step further to the experiences of our lives, you have experiences. Experiences don't have you. So you are not your experiences. You are greater than your experiences. And you are also you are greater than the sum of your parts. You're greater in the wholeness of you. An example of this, I am not my experiences, is when I learned that I had an immune condition, an immune disorder, for a while, I felt like, oh gosh, I identified with, oh, this is kind of who I am. But I no longer identify with this is who I am. I'm whole. And this disorder is just something that I have. It's a part of what I carry, but it is not David. It's not the wholeness of who I am. And it does not define me. It does not have power over me. So kind of coming full circle to, well, why does this conflict happen? Of course, it happens because we're in this dual existence. It's a part of the way the world is, but you can look at it differently other than kind of it is what it is. If you believe in what Abraham Hicks says, Esther Hicks, she would call the conflict what? She calls it contrast. And if we listen to the contrast, it's a teacher. It points to us crystallizing what we want and crystallizing what we don't want. And if you start swaying away from the path of what you really want, of what you really want, if you just start spending more time over here, you'll bump into contrast, and contrast will say, uh-oh, no, I don't like that. I would, I really want this. And this is what color it is. This is what it looks like exactly. I mean, it really crystallizes what your vision is. So that's how conflict can serve a purpose. And it also serves to give you appreciation. Like if you think back in challenges in your life that gave you an appreciation, what were they? Or gave you knowledge that your soul required, as Myrtle Fillmore would say, that your soul required to fulfill its mission. The soul will do that. It will gather things to fulfill its mission. Gary Simmons says, conflict arises to get our attention and to help us find our center and help us learn to get back to wholeness. But he also says we must find a way in all this to feel complete even in our brokenness, to feel complete even in our, actually he says, seeming brokenness. We are not broken. So this is where the title of the book comes in. It's this thing, I'm going to show you the cover of the book, the eye of the storm spelled in a particular way. And every hurricane, I believe, someone's going to correct me, but I believe every hurricane has an eye. Let's just argue that that's true. And the eye of the storm, you've seen movies and you've seen pictures of everything is calm, like freakishly calm. There's birds flying around, the sun is shining in that storm. And the very nature of that storm is the stronger the storm, the bigger its eye is. It's a place of calm and peace in the center. And because we are connected to all things, it just so happens to be that we have this place of peace too. It's the true us. It's our center. So that's why the word I is spelled with an I. It's the eye of the storms of our lives. So how do we return to and identify and use this as a pivot place where we can come from strength, where we can come from balance, where we can come from, like they say in Aikido or in boxing, the more you are coming from your balance and your center, you can be light. You can dance around these things. Dancers use the same concept of center and balance constantly. That's the place, ironically, where you get your most power, is where you have this flexible center. A place that feels like God, perhaps. And that's what the I really is. It's really identifying the divine I. And so remembering some of the tougher moments of your life where you had storms going on, how did you find your center? And did the storm pass? I can think of some of the worst storms in my life. The storms passed, and looking back at them, the emotional charge is no longer, but the wisdom is. The intelligence and the learning is. And so what the rest of this book does, and I'm going to take some from this book, but I'm going to take some from my own learnings, is how do we find our way back to the center when we're in these storm conditions? How do we remember to remember? And one possible way is by defining the storm as not existing at all, or by making friends with the storm. And there's this word called enmity, and the Bible also talks about having an enemy in no one. And I looked up what enmity, E-N-M-I-T-Y, means. It means the state of feeling or being actively opposed or hostile to someone or something. So the theory that Gary Simmons, the author of this book, has is that the point of power comes in when we don't have enmity towards anything. So where are your enemies? And it might help to just jot, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, it might just help to jot down 3 areas. One area is like just draw 3, like a grid with 3 things on it. Body, that's the header of one section. People is the header of another section, and situations is the header of another section. And so think about what throws you off. Focus on the body first. What brings you resistance about your body? Or when you think about something and you feel resistance in your body, what is that? What throws you off balance? What weighs heavy on your heart about your body or the physical world? And next, think about people. Are there people that pull your strings, throw you off center? Let's breathe through this. And make you defensive. And now let's think about situations. Are there situations where you automatically put up a wall, where you go into defensive mode, where you become silent, where you get angry or triggered? And let's just breathe into it, knowing that that's just a thought. That's not here right now. And so be thinking about this motif, this metaphor of the storm, and that all happening as the storm, and you being in the eye of the storm, where there's a place in you that is never and can never be touched, that can never be hurt. And I'll clarify, that can never be touched by pain, that only has known love, and that is your wisest and highest sage self. And now imagine from this wisest, highest sage self, any one of these situations that throws you off balance is a gift to you in some way, is a gift for you in some way. And just don't argue with that concept in your mind. Just say, there's a gift in this for me. There was a gift in this for me. And I just breathe from my center. And I have inner resources to deal with this. So in this place where I'm thrown off balance, where is peace and where is wholeness and where is grace? It absolutely is in this center space that is the I, the divine self. So that's one exercise, and that is called not having an enemy or enmity for anything. And the second one I'll talk about real briefly is so important. It's how can I bring God into this situation? How can I bring God, the God of my understanding, or greater connectedness to my spirituality? I'll just call that God right now. Instead of saying the situation, oh, it is what it is. It is what it is. Well, that may be a helpful tool, but how do I bring God into this situation? There may be situations in your life where you get to exercise spiritual behaviors such as forgiveness, where you get to exercise spiritual behaviors such as compassion or self-compassion, or where you get to experience something called the Golden Key. And for those of you who have heard of it, the Golden Key, it's a small book by Emmett Fox, I believe. And I highly recommend it. It's such a short book, or you can find it online. You can find the Golden Key. And it's basically looking at a situation and saying, in this situation, I'm only going to think of God. that there's only one presence and one power that we say every Sunday. There's only one presence and one power, right? No matter what new thought you follow, whether it's agape or Center for Spiritual Living or Unity, it all begins with there's only this God of my understanding. And that's called the golden key. So breathing into that awareness, thinking that there is only God, it brings me back to my center. And as David Alt says, you can just witness the fervor and the fear. That's what he said a few weeks ago. You can witness the fervor and the fear and not identify with it. That's an incredibly powerful place to be. And it goes back again to perhaps the Buddhist non-attachment to that which is not real, right? So I'm going to share just a few more brief ones. Knowing that the answers are not in the chaos. The answers are in the silence. So the reason why we have a meditation every Sunday is it's paramount to spiritual practice, not only in unity, but in practically every religion you can think of. There is a practice of silence, meditation. There's a mystic practice, and music is a part of that. And I remember when I was going through my interview panels to get into ministerial school, and one person at the end of one of the panels, she just said to me, "Oh, and just remember, be still and know." And she said it with this freaky calm in her voice, but that I'll never forget. Be still and know. And I think that means that I've got to connect with this inner space inside of me where I can ask for guidance. When I get still, and Juliet said, let's go into the silence, this is where I can listen and surrender and give up whatever is bothering me, and maybe say, okay, I give this up and I ask for guidance. I let it go because I know that the wisdom is going to come to me. And for those of you who follow the 12-step program, it may be finding serenity in the things you can't change, and finding that wisdom to know that you can change certain things that are absolutely within your power and your responsibility to change. Two more quick ones. David Alt said a couple of months ago, and by the way, he's going to be with us July 9th, I think. He said, to be grateful for it all. Now that's easy, but to be grateful for it all, even the tragedies, is where the power comes in. To be grateful for it all of it. That doesn't mean just part of it. It means grateful for the life that you are living is an incredible way to bring yourself back to your power. And finally, for those scientists in the crowd, and new thought mystic scientists, I'll say that trust that there is divine order, because I talked about chaos. And if you know something about chaos theory, it's essentially that there is no chaos. Chaos really is just this seemed, like you're looking at something and it seems like it's random and it's like chaotic. Everything is a complex system. And I'll read this definition of chaos, or chaos theory. Chaos theory states that within the apparent randomness of chaotic complex systems, there are underlying patterns, interconnections, constant feedback loops, repetition, self-similarity, fractals, and self-organization. What that all basically says is that there are no mistakes, I think, and that everything must be in divine order. God is, who said, was it Einstein that said, God is not playing dice with the universe? God is not playing dice with the universe. I would love to see if someone can Google that and find who said that. But that is trusting in the divine order. So I'm about complete, but I wanted to read something that came from the foreword of this book by Gary Simmons. And I'm going to share my screen while I'm doing this, because it's going to be a little bit of a moment to maybe go within. So I want you to take a deep breath and imagine for a moment a time before your birth when you were wandering the heavens as a not yet incarnated soul. You were immersed in the beauty and the peaceful harmony of this place, this paradise, when a call went out for volunteers to incarnate into human form. A small blue planet in the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy was experiencing crisis and was in need of souls who were willing to be there and to incarnate there to help out Earth's time of need and all the people that live there. So you made a decision to go there. But there was a catch. Not only were you to serve, you were also required to grow through your experience there. And it was your job to increase the intensity of your light and to grow in wisdom as well as to serve, and to grow in stature and power and to grow in love while you were there. Next, you had to make a series of decisions that would perfectly situate you to be of complete service and to develop your soul. So you had to decide what particular set of gifts you would bring. You decided who your human family would be, who your friends would be, what date of birth you would have, and what astrological configuration you would have. And you would decide what place on earth you would manifest in, where you would animate, what climate, what race, what ethnicity would best express yourself, what socioeconomic class would you be born into so you could serve. So you would choose everything that you need for your expansion in this lifetime. You would choose your siblings, if you had any, and your relationship to them in age, your soulmates related to you or not. And finally, you would choose a name for yourself. Once these decisions were made, you were free to incarnate and begin your earthly mission, forgetting everything that came before. So you would forget that you chose to become here. But with time, you would slowly but surely begin to rediscover and re-remember why you were here. And that's what's happening right now. Because every factor in your life has perfectly positioned you for the service you are about to perform and have been performing all along in only the way that you could have done. So you could carry out miracles only to be performed by you for the good of you and for the good of all. So this is remembering to remember. This is a fun exercise that you can come back to. I just call this blessed. I just call this sacred and holy as you are. And I'm so grateful for the gifts and the talents of everyone in this room. And I'm so grateful that we chose to incarnate here in this place and in this time on purpose. And so it is.
Living life in a tiny square, broken pieces seem to lead nowhere. Why do I feel that my life is just pretend? All my dreams staying way too small. They lead me back to where I started from. And how can I move when I fear what lies ahead? Well, there's more than what I see. Each step brings me closer to free. Yeah, I realize you're inside of me. I realize there are no walls in between you and me and this holy word. You and me and this holy word. And I realize now, yeah. And with each new day I see my life getting bigger with less denying. It's my choice now to leave or just give in. Every morning I give thanks, amen, to all the growth I've experienced. And I've become a dream that's worth believing I am. But there's more than what I see, there's more. Each step brings me closer to me. Yeah, I realize it's inside of me. Yeah, I realize there are no walls in between you and me and this holy word. There are no walls in between you and me, God, and your holy word. Well, it's a long road, but one I choose to travel through this lifetime. And I am learning what not to do. Believe me, well, there's more than what you see. Oh, I realize it's inside of me. Yeah, I realize there are no walls in between. I realize it's inside of me. I realize there are no walls in between you and me and this holy word. I know no walls now. There are no walls between you and me, between me and my neighbor. There are no walls between me and this holy earth. I know no walls between. There is unity in me. There are no walls in between you and me and this holy word. Sing with me. There are no walls in between you and me and this holy word. No walls. There are no walls in between you and me and this holy word. There are no walls in between you and me and this holy word.